This is the Note Closer Show, where you get the latest developments in distressed note investing and learn the secrets of how you can control millions of dollars worth of property for pennies on the dollar. Get educated and entertained by someone who has closed thousands of deals and lives to support you in achieving the same. Now, here's your host, CEO of We Close Notes, Scott Carson.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Note Closer Show. As always, Scott Carson, excited to be here today. And I am so freaking jacked up, so excited for today's special guest and some things that we're going to dive into. And she has been a friend for a few years now. I met her originally and she was crawling underneath my chair, underneath the tripod at the event. The hardest working, I've called her the hardest working person in social media marketing. And we're honored to have her back. Got some great announcements, some stuff that she's working on that you guys are going to want to jump in, support, be a part of. But we are always honored to have the one, the only, always lovely, the badass Miss Stefanie LaHart join us here today. Join us live from LA today. Is that right, Stefanie?
Yes, I'm in LA in an undisclosed location, enjoying the gorgeous weather as it is here every day. And, you know, just to clarify what you said about crawling under your chair, yes. I was crawling under tripods at a conference because I was trying to give them full social media coverage live. And that is where you first saw me. So I love that you remember me that
say
way. That because
you would have, to get the best shot, you would have crawled under. Totally would have. Yeah, totally would have.
And I'm not saying once conferences start again that I won't be crawling under more chairs.
Exactly.
You know, it's kind of nice that we have that memory of what it was like to meet people in person.
Exactly. And that's the thing is you and I hang out in Orlando, LA.
Yeah.
I mean, we usually run into each other at conferences, San Diego and stuff like that. And one of the beauties, I mean, you've been on here before. You've been on Note Camp. You were on Note Camp, the conference. You've done it a couple of times before because you're such up to date with what's going on in the market. But let's talk about you versus the market right now. You've got a really great thing that you're announcing. And I want to say it may not be exclusive here, but it's pretty exclusive.
Oh, it's pretty exclusive. You're the first one to get this story.
Oh, so yeah. Ooh,
are.
Here you guys, ladies and gentlemen, you have an NCS exclusive here for you at the Note Closer Show podcast. And so I'm going to hang on. Hang on. Drum roll, please. Tell us the big news. Tell us.
I love it. So Scott, when you and I met a couple years ago, I said, "Hey, Scott, I wrote a book. It's a fiction book, but based in the world of social engineering." You're like, "Great. I want to buy like 50 copies. Where can I get it?" And I was like, "Oh, it's not published yet." Well, Scott, a timely 2 years later, I'm finally getting off my butt to start moving on this. And honestly, one of the things that was holding me back was the fact that I just didn't really know what kind of platform I wanted to put it out there on, because obviously there's a lot of options you have these days with self-publishing and things like that. And I wanted to make sure that I was going to be able to get it to the right audience at the right time. So what just happened in the last couple of months, because by the way, this has been a totally productive year for me. COVID 2020 has not been like any kind of slow period for me.
Right.
I was approached by a company called Publicizer, who essentially set up book Kickstarter campaigns. And what it allows you to do is to actually start, talking about your book and marketing it, like pre-marketing it to your audience and getting interest, which is in the guise of like pre-sales, okay, like pre-orders. And what they've done is they have partnered with a bunch of different publishers of all levels. And what they do is, once you launch your Kickstarter campaign, your book starter, and then you get these pre-orders, what it does for these publishers is allow them to see that people are actually interested in your book. Oh my God, this is how you get a book deal these days. You don't have to just rely on doing something like, well, I'm just going to launch it on, Amazon, which is great. But unless you have a very, very strong following, like maybe you've already done a book, it's very hard to launch a first book on a platform like Amazon. So what Publicizer is doing for me and for many authors is you launch your book Kickstarter. Okay. You work on getting up to 5. They want you to do like a base of 500 pre-orders, just so a publisher can see, okay, you have a base, you have people that are interested in your book. So that is what I'm launching on the 15th for my book, which is already done. And it is called The Winning Number. And as I had said earlier, it is a book set in the world of social engineering, which, is kind of my expertise here. And it's actually, if you remember, it came to me, the idea came to me. Oh, thank you. You're putting up my cover. Beautiful. The idea for the book came to me a couple of years ago when a story was related to me by a very close friend, of something that had happened to someone she knew. And what it started with was a phone call. The
Wow.
person had gotten a phone call saying, "You won Publishers Clearinghouse."
Okay.
And it turned out to be a huge scam.
Mm,
And it went on for months and months and months. And, ultimately it ended with, the scam being stopped, but they did not find the guy. And I became obsessed with the idea of what would happen if this person got tracked down, and how would you track them down and what would happen, right? And then
mhm.
I thought, being a social media strategist like I'm like, I know how to find this person. And so I started laying out a plan of like how I would find this person, how I would track them down. And next thing you know, I was writing this book. 65,000 words later, I'm like, oh my God, this is a really good story. So that's what
Well, I love this, and I mean, right, because
story.
I love it so much because we in the note space are often feel like Sherlock Holmes and having to track people down, and that's why
Yes.
this is so relevant for you out there. I love what you're doing with this and going through. And look, this isn't just a book. You're an expert. You got to brag on yourself a little bit about being a very Stephanie Sleuth. So you've also done some cool stuff also that has helped with the book too, correct?
Exactly. So, when I started getting interested in how I would do this, I started doing a lot more research, on my own about social engineering, about how it's done, how people are scammed, why people scam, like why do people fall for it, and then what happens in there and all the different scams that are out there. And what it ultimately led me to do was I found out about a competition that happens in Vegas every year at DEF CON, which of course is the biggest hackers convention that's been going on for over 25 years. And they have a whole social engineering village where they have a competition where they will have people compete live on stage, where you call your company, you I came second highest call score. And they were just like, they had never heard of me before. They're like, who is this person? Because these are mostly kind of like, people that are very high into like
Mm-hmm.
computer hacking. And then I just roll in and me, I'm very bubbly and kind of goofy and all this. And they're like, who is this girl? And I'm like, Stefanie LaHart. And so it was really, really great. And by the way, they will all be knowing about my book because I will be Twittering the hell out of that. But yeah, so I did the competition twice and just learned so much more about social engineering that I was like, I could definitely write this book. So it ended up kind of actually going on. It might be a trilogy at this point, unless an editor scales me back. I mean, I have the second book almost done. First book is done. We're in the process of editing it. The second book is halfway done. And then the third book, of course, has to take place at DEF CON. It has to.
I love it.
So, yeah.
That is good stuff there. So, what would you say in with your book and what you've done? What's one of the things that is just blew your mind how easy it was to get or how easy it was to find information on somebody? And I see all good. We got family in the background. I got cats jumping back and forth. There you go. Hi, Auntie.
Yeah.
But yeah, what's one of the biggest surprises that you found was able to, as far as information or sleuthing that you were able to accomplish? So that kind of
Some of the what social engineering really comes down to is being able to connect the dots. Okay, we just have to accept the fact that there is a lot of information about us out there, just everyone in general, right? But where social engineering comes in and where the skill comes in is being able to connect the dots of how this relates to something. So you could say, well, I could go to your LinkedIn profile and find out a ton about you. It's like, yes, but what do you do with that information and how is it relevant? And what could, if you were potentially looking for what they call an attack vector, what could you do with it, right? So one of the things I really learned was like how easy it was to start connecting those dots, specifically because there's all kinds of different apps. Like, do you use Venmo?
yes,
Okay. Venmo has a privacy setting where you
yes.
can turn it off so people cannot see that you are, actually paying someone. I can't believe how many people don't turn that off, Scott. Okay. That gives you so much information into somebody's lifestyle, into their world, into their connections, and things like that. Is if you started a place like with LinkedIn where you have a pretty broad knowledge of who somebody is, I would just start jumping on things like that, looking at things like Venmo and even PayPal and figuring out who's in their inner circle and how you can use that. And that really surprised me that there are still apps that are allowing that information to be out there. There's no reason that Venmo should have that open as a default. No reason, right? You think of something like Facebook, like, oh, well, you want your Facebook friends to be open because you want to be able to connect with people. But something like a payment app like Venmo, there's no reason I should ever see Scott paid Stefanie $40 for XYZ. Why, right? So there's things like that that are still out there that you're like, wow, people need to be a little bit more savvy and understand. And also companies need to take more responsibility for stuff like that and be like, we don't need to put that. If we're going to have that as a feature, it has to be something you turn on. And it's not on Venmo. It's default still. That really surprised me still that companies are doing that in this day and age with everything that's going on with privacy.
You know, totally think about that and being able to track that publicly, especially if anybody's doing anything shady, online or paying people other ways they don't do, or hey, the time they send it to, who they have dinner with, they split the bill. That's a great thing to think about.
And also from a law enforcement standpoint, and I'll just tell you a personal experience I just had. So I recently had to sell something on Facebook Marketplace, okay? And I see this person listing something that looks like random objects, like hair scrunchie, $10. And I'm like, that's weird. And I click, and I'm just very inquisitive. I click through. Well, the next picture is a puppy. And then there's another puppy. And I realized, oh, they're selling live animals on Facebook Marketplace, which first of all is against the law. Secondly, they had 75 listings and Facebook could not shut them down. So my project in the last 2 weeks, honestly, Scott, has been just reporting all of these listings I'm finding because I'm like, oh my God, Facebook's not scanning this stuff.
Right.
And people are doing live animal sales, which is puppy mills on things like that. So when you think of stuff like that, it's like, you can be like, well, Facebook makes you use like a lot of your personal information. Well, I know who this person is. I know where they live. I know who their contacts are. And I'm not driving with them selling puppies. I could be somebody who would track them down, right? And maybe turn them over to the local authorities, or even better, call up PETA.
Well, I'm just thinking about that for what we do on the debt side of things, the tracking.
I love about something like that. Just.
Are you there?
Yeah.
Hang on a second.
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay. Hang on a second here.
I don't know if it's my connection or yours. Oh, my connection's unstable, it's saying. And Nancy, should I go to the other room?
Here we go. All right. So yeah, that's a surprising thing that Venmo actually leaves that on as a setting and doesn't make you have to turn it on. It's automatic. That leads to a lot of things of thinking about on our end, because we do social sleuthing on Facebook and Instagram for our bars. Now, I didn't know that. If I could check out what they're paying somebody else out there,
see what they're spending their money on.
Yes, and then it should be going to pay their mortgage, not pay for
we've
bills.
Talked about this before, you and I, Scott, about people's responsibilities. You could definitely see where that money's going, and like I said, also about like figuring out who their inner circle is. Somebody like you're paying repeatedly for whatever, obviously that's somebody, it's like, oh, okay, that's somebody quite well then. So
now the information that they're giving, I mean, is it their Facebook profile, emails, phone numbers? What's the stuff that you're seeing off of that?
Off of Venmo or from Facebook?
On Venmo.
No, on Venmo, it simply shows you who paid who.
Okay.
So it'll be like Stefanie paid Scott $40, and Venmo's all about using like emojis for like if you type in for a gift, it'll show like a little gift emoji and things like that. But there's still a lot of data tracking in there because, like I said, you can start seeing, and one of the things that I show in my book, my fiction book of how, okay, so the girl's name in the book is Ruby Soho, but let's be honest, it was kind of me living out my fantasy. So I'm probably going to get a shirt made that says I am Ruby Soho.
Oh, I love it.
I love the name. So excuse me. But one of the things in the book that I really dove into was like, how would you track down this person? Okay. The first thing was my friend who had told me about the story had access to the credit card statements because apparently this person had told her family member to open up credit cards and then they were using them. Okay. So when the scam started getting busted open and they realized these credit cards, they had the credit card statements all sent to them because they weren't even getting credit card statements. The guy had everything rerouted. So I'm sitting there looking through this huge box of credit card statements and I'm like, oh, wow, all this stuff is in Silver Lake. I know where this is. And the guy's repeatedly going to the same places. this is why this is important. If you're going to the same restaurant and I'm seeing on a credit card statement and in 1 month you've been there 5 times, somebody in that restaurant knows you, right?
Yes.
You're, especially if you're a good tipper, they definitely know you. If you're a bad tipper, they absolutely know you, right?
Yes.
You go into that place, and in my book, I'm just like revealing how I did in the book. In the book, Ruby decides she's going to go and track this guy down to one of his favorite restaurants. She goes in there and starts saying, my friend recommended this restaurant to me. And then you just start throwing out information and see what people grab onto. Oh, who's your friend? Oh, and you start describing them like, oh, I don't really know that person. And then you say other things like, well, I know the date and times he's there because on the credit card statement, right? Oh, he comes in here every Tuesday. And then you can figure out just from menu items, like, okay, if he's always spending about $33, you can figure out looking at the menu what this guy's buying. Is the menu priced so $33 would only feed one person? Okay, let's say it is. Oh, my friend comes in here every Tuesday, he always eats by himself, right? They start throwing out information to you. Oh my God, that sounds like that could be John, blah, blah, blah. And you start getting, and you start connecting the dots that way. And then next thing you know, you're just like, that's the person, right? Now they'll say something, they might say something to you like, oh, do you mean John with the blonde hair? Oh yeah, that's my friend. Well, what would you do next to see if this was the person, right? Because you have a little bit of physical description. Start staking the places out. Wait to see on Tuesday who's showing up, right? This guy, his scam was busted. He might have but you could tell with something like this, he was probably running multiple. He's not going to change his favorite restaurant and be like, ooh, they're on to me. People are lazy and stupid, and you know that. Scott, I mean, seriously.
Wow. And if they're eating at a place regularly, they probably live nearby as well.
Exactly. Oh, and the other thing is he had multiple Uber and Lyft rides on there. Okay. Again, just by the amount, you can tell exactly what you said. Is he in the area? If your Lyft ride is only $12, I know you're probably in a 10-mile radius. I'm getting closer and closer to where your hub is. I know where you eat. I know where you live. I know where you shop. Going to the same Bonds, Scott. He was going to the same Bonds all the time.
That's the same thing. When you build it, people start recognizing
the habits. Exactly. And that's something, like I said, I became obsessed with the idea. So I wrote down what would happen if. Now, people always say, did you track him down? And I say, no, I am a social media strategist. I am not in law enforcement, and I did not decide to make that my job. However, I was more than willing to turn over information I had to my friend and to the authorities to whatever they wanted to do, because you have to understand too, with something like that, when you're getting involved with people of a criminal element, you gotta decide how much you want to be in that world. And I decided I was not going to put myself in that situation, because something with scamming too, especially money. And you know this because you deal with people and money problems. People get ugly when money's involved.
That's correct.
So I was also very, aware of my own security to make sure that I wasn't putting myself in dangerous situations. Because I did go to a lot of these places that I then renamed for the book.
You always have to do that. It's one of the things that you want to have a degree of separation between you and your clients or who's reaching out. And that's a big thing, especially this time of year. I'm just going to put this out here as a general warning. As you're getting to the end of the year, there's a lot more crimes that happen because people are trying to break in. They don't have money paying for expenses, paying for bills. And yes, people get stressed. They do stupid things when they get stressed. It makes me think about an investor friend of mine who a couple years ago, he went to collect the rent on a house that was defaulted. And the guy had paid for months, but the guy invited him in and killed him and his wife. The renter did, and then rolled them up in the carpets, put it in their car, and then drove the car off a cliff later on. And that's why I tell people, you need to have that third party. Don't do it all, because in some cases like that, if it's like they see you show up and taking photos of the guy at the restaurant or tracking that out. It's the same thing when we drive through and look at properties. We always want to do it incognito because they're like, why is that person taking photos of my house?
Yep.
And these days, you don't want to be getting shot at, in a variety of
money
things.
Is very emotional. You are right. You need to, especially in those circumstances. So, but again, with the amount of data that's out there, it's very easy for people to, without even going to a physical location, connect the dots of what your habits are and what you do. And, as a social strategist, and something you and I have talked about forever, social media is very good and very bad at the same time because our information is out there. but understanding that your information's out there. And then also being very savvy when you are approached by stuff, by getting phone calls or letters or even emails, and taking a minute before you react to be like, oh, is this real? Is this happening? I have a good story. A couple years ago, I got an email that was sent to my mom. So I control my parents' emails, of course. And I get this email that her name was misspelled. So it defaults to my email address because I'm catch-all. And it looked like she had missed a car payment or something. So I'm like, Mom, you didn't pay your car payment. And I sent it to her and she just emails me back, LOL. And I call her up. I'm like, what? Why aren't you paying this? What is going on? And of course, I'm thinking, oh my God, maybe my parents are having money problems and they don't want to tell me. So I'm getting emotionally charged, right? And I'm getting upset. And I get her on the phone. She goes, that's not even our car company. And I was like, and I saw how quickly I emotionally got pulled in because I was worried about my parents. Do you see how that works though? And it was something like they sent it to me saying, oh, your parents owe this and that. And maybe I'm just like mad at my parents or whatever it is. And I'm just like, I'm just going to pay this. I don't want to deal with them right now. And then suddenly I pay out $2,000. And then I talk to my mom later and say, well, I took care of that for you. And she's like, what are you talking about? That's how they get you. It's emotional.
Well, it makes me think of something. We've had people, you've seen around this time of year, I think a year or two ago, we had a friend of ours who got scammed by those fake IRS calls. That, hey, you need to go and wire us via Western Union $2,500 or we're going to have an IRS agent show up to arrest you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then you also think about this, like even big names. Barbara Corcoran from the Shark Tank got scammed out of $400,000 on a closing just a few months ago. Big news. Somebody sent over to her assistant, and Barbara's constantly buying real estate.
Yeah.
And said, hey, here's the wiring instructions for this property at such and such. It looked like the title company. Lo and behold, her assistant just does the wire to get it done. Boom, 400 and some odd grand gone.
I was not aware of that story. I'm going to have to look it up. Yeah. And that's a great example. Even people that you're thinking, oh, they want to get scammed. And yeah, it can really happen to anyone. So, I think that's another great thing that I'm hoping that people are going to take away from my book, even though it is, like I said, it was based on a true story, but what happens in it is fiction. I want it to be almost like a wake-up call and an education to people too of how this is done and why people do it and how it can become something, something real, like in reality. And like you didn't, and you're like, oh, I didn't realize that. So I'm hoping like they'll enjoy it for the fiction aspect. And there's a lot of like funny stuff in it too, a lot of drama. But I want them to also be like, oh, I need to be aware of this. Like this could happen to me. So, and hey, who doesn't want to win a Publishers Clearinghouse? Who doesn't want to get that check? Hey, I bought a lottery ticket for the Super Lotto tonight. I want to win $28 million like everyone else. So Publishers Clearinghouse called me, which by the way, they never call you. I would be like, yeah, I got all this money. It's the emotion. It's the surge.
I can attest to crap happening. I had an aunt who's been passed, but she's my uncle's wife and not all there. All right. But she gets a phone call. Same thing. You've won the Publishers Clearinghouse.
Oh.
$20 million. Seriously. So she goes out and starts looking at making offers on real estate because she's like, I won the Publishers Clearinghouse, and all sorts of trouble because she believed this and was all making quick decisions without realizing it wasn't real. Nobody showed up with a balloon and a big check, and she had to send some money out. So she lost money because she wired out money to secure something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but not just that, it was all these houses she put under contract and earnest money checks that she wrote that she didn't have because she thought this. Yeah. So she was just fired at all. Like, just like, let's go. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it was an embarrassment for her and the family.
Money's intoxicating though.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you a question though, because we have about half our audience is women, and it's right at 51%. Is that a little risky? I mean, I know you're a little bit of a risk taker though.
What is risky? Which part?
Well, a little bit of tracking people down like this. Are you ever afraid? Because you've done some other things too that are really exciting. You're a bit of a risk taker. You just had an article come out about you in risk and how you kind of look at risk a little bit. I really love how you outlined how you evaluate things to kind of take away the scare factor in a lot of times, because a lot of people would hear something like this and get immediately scared and run to their safe spot. You evaluate things a little bit differently. Talk about that a little bit, Stefanie.
Yes, actually, thank you for mentioning that. I love that article. It was out on a website called Shout Out LA, and they asked me. They said, how do I think about risk? And people, when they hear the word risk, normally can trigger a lot of emotional feelings of like, oh, like scared, right? And really, risk for me, and what I said in the article is, I think of them as educated guesses, and it's
Yeah.
really they kind of, if you can look at them, they're driven by 4 pillars, which is information, emotion, value, and potential. Okay. And when you start filtering information, like filtering the situation through these 4 different pillars, you can make a better assessment of what the actual situation is. Like first of all, getting all the information, checking your emotion, right? Because like we just talked about, if money's involved, it can be very emotional. Checking what's the value of doing this or not doing this. And then, what's your potential for your future? Like, what could potentially happen that could be good and bad. And, when you look at stuff like that, for me anyway, and evaluate them with those 4 different ways, you can come to a much better decision, a much we'll say cleaner decision, much more clear and valuable to you about what you want to do. Because remember, risk is not, sometimes I feel like people hear the word risk and they think of risk as like pulling a handle on a slot machine. Like just like no control over the situation, what's going to be, what's going to be. And that's not how it is. And it certainly shouldn't be how you run your business. And I do like to say that I've made some very good risk in my life. Number one was moving across the country when I was only 21 years old, because I knew I wanted to live out here in California. And I'm like, well, let me figure out how this is going to done. But even then, I made sure I had things in place so I wasn't just suddenly showing up in a new town with no plan. I had friend network, I had a family network, I had job leads, things like that. So it's not about like, oh, I need to make sure everything is set in stone, but at least having a path or, a plan when you're doing stuff will put you in a much better situation. And that's really when you could start leveraging what your risk of that actual situation is. So yeah, you can look at risk as something potentially, detrimental, or like this year, which I'm going to put this out there and I'm going to stand behind it. 2020 for me has been one of the best years of my life.
Nice.
I've had so many opportunities. I launched a new fitness business, which I'll tell you about on a different podcast, where I've actually built a fitness site for a person who was a friend of mine and is now my business partner. And it's called the Barboza Method. It's totally new, this workout. So we launched this whole business, and we've been doing things like that because suddenly people were much more receptive to home workouts, which is something we have been wanting to do. You know what I mean? So if you look at stuff at all the time, it's like, well, how can I leverage what's going on, the change, to really make it a better situation instead of getting very, I like to call it the closed fist. Let me hold on. Ooh, so scared, right? And just open hands of like, let this come into me.
I love that, because you're so right with everything going on this year, especially this past year. People have tried to hold on to the way business was being done beforehand. You think about, I've got, yeah, exactly. Let it go and evolve.
Open up your hands, let it go, and then let stuff come into you.
Right. But that's the thing is knowing the opportunities, because people are like, oh, what's the worst thing that could happen? Well, what if the best thing can happen? And realize usually something's going to happen more so in the middle, middle to great versus worst to worse. Right. In the most guys, and so many people let their fears, oh, I can't quit my job because I got a government job. Well, if you were furloughed for 90 days or 120 days, you're not getting a paycheck with your great government job. Or I'm working for the man or the woman, but I really want to do something myself, but I'm not going to take that first step because, I'm scared of it being risky. Well, there's a lot of things out there. A lot of people that had great jobs that are now not doing anything, not doing so good, because they didn't take those initial steps to step away or start something that, it could be risky. But no, if you, like you said, you build a network, you build some backup plans, you really research the stuff and dive into what you're trying to do. It can remove the risk and the fear in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're ever in the situation where you are furloughed or suddenly you find yourself like not working for, let's just say 60 days, use that time to start building something else. Yeah, there's really no excuse at this point to not start some kind of online business. Just at least start selling something on eBay, but making those motions instead of sitting back and waiting people to hand you stuff all the time. We don't live in that world anymore. Yeah. Even if you have a job at an office and you're like, well, I just go and do my job at my office and then I come home. My younger sister is a great example of this. She always likes to say that because she looks at me and my entrepreneur life, she's like, that's too much work. I don't want to do that. But she is a secret entrepreneur. She is always hustling something. She's selling bags. She's, she actually got her real estate license and sold a property. She's done all this stuff, but she's always like, I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't do this. And the thing is, people don't think of themselves that way. She doesn't see herself as an entrepreneur, although she's always been doing entrepreneurial things along with still having her full-time job. And I invite people who are listening to understand and start seeing themselves in a bigger light that you can use. I mean, you can name yourself whatever you want, use the tags, use the titles, it doesn't matter. But if you've ever sold Avon or Tupperware, you're an entrepreneur.
Yes.
Like, own it. And then also allow yourself to do other opportunities. Like, yeah, she went out, got a real estate license, sold a condo in like a month. And we're all like, where'd that come from? But she's the person that'll sit there and be like, I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm like, no, that was very entrepreneurial. So yeah.
Well, I love that, because when you're talking about the side hustles, selling bags, I think of Gary Vaynerchuk, visiting garage sales or estate sales and picking something up and then sell it online, or doubling down and move it to somebody via Facebook Marketplace or something like that. And honestly, with what's going on right now in the market, so many people being laid off of work, it reminds me of what happened 10 years ago, where people had a peak, everything was going well, so they bought all these toys and extra things. Now they got to sell those things to make the rent or make the mortgage payment. So a lot of opportunities. You see an increase in estate sales or garage sales. Hey, show up. You never know what you'll find, that you can pick up a discount and flip it for some sort of reason. Just don't use Venmo without being on the privacy settings.
Set the privacy settings so people don't see what you're paying people. It's so stupid. It's like, but Scott, you and I talked a little bit before we got on the actual recording about a certain video that is out there right now.
Yes, I'm glad you
brought
brought
that up.
The
Social Dilemma.
Let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that shit show. Here's my feelings on the Social Dilemma. They gave you a lot of fear without any resolution, which I do not appreciate. I had a very heated discussion with somebody who was all like acting like it had just been revealed, all this information's out there. I'm like, no, this is not new. We all knew this was happening. We all knew, listen, 20 years ago when they first started putting police records online and you could search them, cat was already out of the bag.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So it's like, don't be surprised your information's out there. What you need to do now is, like I said, be more savvy. When you sign up for a service, take the 5 seconds to look at the privacy setting and make sure you're not putting that information out there, And also in things like Facebook, because Facebook's never going away. So let's stop pretending that's going to happen. Take the time to set the settings so, maybe your friends list is hidden, or you're not accepting people like you don't know. And also, excuse me, I'm getting very animated here. You don't feel like you need to put every single thing you do online. You don't have to. That doesn't, that's not what social media has to be about.
Well, it's the same thing. I think back to the election 4 years ago, when the biggest name about pulling data was Cambridge Analytics.
Ooh, and that was a good video.
It was, and I'm like, okay, what's so wrong with Cambridge? It's a great documentary. And I'm like, wait a second. We as marketers are using that same type of information for custom audiences, custom lists. It's not anything surprising. I mean, I could buy an email list, upload it to Facebook and start marketing directly to a person.
Yeah.
And depend on what I ask for, like Melissa data or these list building services, they could pull by employees, they could pull by income, how much you have in retirement. If there's a lot of scary information out there, but you also need to use it for good. But for anything that be used for good, we all know can be used for bad too, right?
Right. And like I said, again, about the education process, understanding that all of your data is out there. It's not a bad thing. I'm not against it. But what we need to do is understand your data is out there and be more savvy about how you interact with social media, because you just mentioned the elections. Okay. Cambridge Analytica was a great example of that, where it is, when you are viewing something, the algorithm will pick up on that and keep serving you more of that, which can reinforce an idea you had. Okay. What we need to do is step up and be more, own our intelligence as humans and understand, wow, I'm getting this information served me, and it's not because the whole world thinks like I do. It's because the algorithm is serving me what I've already searched for. So being intelligent enough to be like, oh, you know what? I keep seeing that over and over because the algorithm's giving that to me. And then being like, I know there's another different opinion in this world. I should also actively look for that. Like you have to do the work too. And I'm not saying go out there and like, do like hours and hours of research, but understanding when you're on Facebook, if you're seeing the same thing over and over, it's only because the algorithm has tripped that that's what you want to see. It's not because the entire world agrees with you. So, understand that. You know what I'm saying, Scott?
I 100% agree with you on that. And that's the same thing. People got to realize that you're
Yeah.
searching for this. It's going to serve you back up because of what
It's
you're
going to
doing.
serve it right back up to you. The algorithm wants to keep you on there, but you got to be more open-minded. You can double down on your feelings all you want and say, no, I'm going to, again, tight fist. This is what I believe in, all this. But you know what? You're just playing into the machine then. You're just a cog in the machine without being a free thinker like you should be, like owning your humanity and taking the step and being more of a free thinker. Like, hey, don't agree with me, but guess what? There are many, many different opinions. I don't agree with everything, of people that do in my family. They don't agree with me, but I also accept that they are allowed to have that experience because they have an entire different experience that they have lived through. Like you and I, Scott, very different lives, right? And you could say something like, oh my God, he's an idiot. Why would he think that? I haven't lived your life. You haven't lived mine, but we have to understand and value that your experiences are just as valuable and true as mine, right? So I think I would just like people to step up more and understand what has happened with social media. Because like I said, the Social Dilemma movie really fell short. And I think ways because they just did a lot of scare. They just said, oh, this is all scary and everybody's going to target you and we should all kind of like live in a closet. And that's not reality. You didn't offer people any solutions. What that documentary should have said is this is data that's out there. Now it is up to you to be, like I said, use your intelligence and use your ability to have free speech and free thought and interact with other people instead of just saying, oh, big scary world.
Well, that's the thing too. People, and we've seen this happen. Not only do people have knee-jerk reactions and think the possible worst, but you think about the fact if you're going to be using a free service, you didn't pay for anything.
Right.
Guess what? You're going to give away some liberties. You're going to be hit with advertising. Facebook didn't become such a big business because they were giving everything away for free. They sold ads. They sell ads.
Right.
And that's what, if you're going to share
everything. They didn't start the model. Think about television from the beginning. Television has always been free because it's run by ads. Yes. And who were some of the big advertisers on TV in the early days? Yep. Cigarette companies.
Exactly. I saw a replay.
Smoke that cigarette.
It had Mike Wallace on an early black and white interview with somebody, and he's like, so, and the cigarette is Parliament. Yep. All right, interview. And I'm like, it's that, and then but
here's the thing now we've become more educated. Now we understand, wow, smoking's not good for you. It will actually kill you. So we're allowed to make those mistakes, but keep growing as a society. And that's what I'm hoping now through maybe movies like The Social Dilemma and the Cambridge Analytica documentary and, whatever's going on in the world, that we keep evolving and understanding, what that is.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that it's so important to do that, is evolve, understand, take things with a grain of salt, and think of it about both sides of the equation or both sides of the conversation. I mean, we've seen such a divide in the country because, oh, you voted for Trump, I'm going to unfriend you, or you voted for Biden, I'm going to unfriend you. And I just kind of laugh, like, if you can't come to a middle spot and realize everybody's entitled to their opinion and their thoughts, okay, great. That's fine. Maybe you don't need to be on a platform. Maybe you should de-platform and go from there and be the Unabomber. But these days, with the way everything works social-wise, Instagram, TikTok, all this stuff, you got to expect that unless you don't want to.
Yeah, and I think the more interesting conversation is to understand, why did people pick a certain side? Why did they pick a side, or why didn't they vote at all? Like, I'm always like fascinated. Like, listen, I started my career as a rock and roll reporter, and it is true. It was because I was fascinated about people's origin stories. How did you get there from here? Why did you create that? Why do you say that? Why do you think that? Because we have such different experiences. It is really fascinating to figure out how people got to that point in their life and be like, that's really interesting, because that's not something I experienced,
But that's what makes us unique. That's what makes this country so unique, though. And we have to embrace that. Is the difference and the ability to have a difference of opinion and different experiences. That's what's so great versus being cookie cutter, black and white, and like 1984. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now, I'll tell you, I actually just recently started dating someone who is he had such an opposite upbringing of what I have. I'm fascinated by every story he tells me because his realm of experience is so different from mine. I'm like, oh my God, that's so interesting. And actually, you know what's funny? Years and years ago, a friend who was a therapist was telling me a great trick that you can use, especially, oh, this is good for the holidays. Around the holidays when you're dealing with your family, because it's all emotional triggers going on, that you go into a family situation and you look at them as if you just landed on an alien planet and they're alien life forms. And everything that they say or do, you look at it through the eyes of a scientist of like, that's so fascinating that you would think or do or say or behave like that, and looking at it literally as something outside of yourself and with that air of fascination. And I tell you, Scott, I've done that at holidays and it really does make it more fun and way less triggering.
So it's funny that you say that's so fascinating, because that was a trigger used by Tony Robbins in his most recent Unleash the Power Within, his big virtual event that he did. He talked about the fact that, hey, we control our emotions. So when you find something, instead of going off the handle, say, I find that fascinating. Why are you doing?
I didn't even know that. I've never been to one of those things, but it's true though.
It is.
No, and this therapist that told me like years ago, she's just like, look at everything and landed on an alien planet and be fascinated about the life forms. And it works.
I love it so much. I love our conversation.
Picture your mom and dad being green with little antennas. And then you won't revert to the 5-year-old that we all tend to.
Exactly.
Treat me like an adult, Mom.
I find it fascinating. Why are you acting that way?
Why?
I have found this whole conversation very fascinating and absolutely love it. I'm so proud of you. You got the book out.
So Scott, you did once tell me that when my book came out, you were going to buy 50 copies.
That's
so I'm
correct.
just going to mark you down for that right now.
You can mark me down for 50
and then
copies.
You can give them away to everyone.
Yes,
Listen,
I will give.
I have a degree in journalism. I'm actually a writer, so the book is actually well written. So it's not going to be like, oh my God, she writes like crap. Like I actually do know how to write. And I'm writing about something that I really know about and I love. So it's going to be a good book.
I absolutely love it.
And then just picture the lead character as me. You'll be like, that's her.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is when you told me you had your book coming out, I was like, okay, we got to get you on, because the lessons learned, whether it's you or Ruby, AKA Ruby, it's going to be something that people can apply and really make useful. So while it might be a fiction book, it's based on a lot of reality, as you've discussed. And with everything going on in the world these days, I think it's really important to be able to chuckle, but also be able to read something like that can give you a little bit of insight, not only on a personal level, but on a business level, like what we do in note investing, but also maybe, that's a question here. I'm sure people are thinking, if you're dating somebody, did you stalk the guy first to find out some information online?
Absolutely.
Okay. All
Absolutely.
Right. Anything you find interesting that you're willing
God,
to...
I told you years ago how I do this, what my dating strategy is with this. Okay.
Yes.
I'm on several dating apps and I never use my real name. Okay. I use an internet name for privacy reasons, obviously.
Yep.
My strategy is this, and something I wanted to put together like a dating course for women, especially women of my age range, because you know what? We're older, we have assets. So what you do is, as soon as you start chatting, you just say to the guy, I would rather chat by text, and you give them your number. Of course, it's not your number. You use a number like a Google Voice number or a burner number or something. And then when they text you and you get their cell phone number, you could run that through all of the systems and find out as much as you want about the person. Again, it's going back to the fact the information's out there. It's not doing anything illegal. The systems are there, but having an informed, information before you meet the person. I mean, I would never meet somebody that I did not run a report on, ever. Mm-hmm. So these guys days, just know that about me right now. And but I'm totally honest with people. When I meet them, I tell them, I'm like, I ran a report on you. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, and here's my name now. Run a report on me if you would like.
There you go. Well, that's the 21st century. You got to expect that everything is out there. You can't hide anything. I mean, you can do like you do. You expect to have a burner phone just to protect yourselves, because there's enough crazies out there, on both sides of the dating aisle.
Don't give out your real number, especially if you're a girl going out there first. Like, I'm not saying anything against guys, but generally we're physically smaller. So,
Yep.
but guys too, though, guys should be, because I'm always just amazed the guys that will like, reveal information to me and give me their number. And I was like, dude, you should have a burner number too, because you made it way too easy on me. Like, just think about it. I've never run into a situation where a guy gave me a fake number and I'm like, I know I'm cute, but I ain't that pretty. So come on.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well,
I love talking to you.
Love talking to you as well. So what's the best way for those that are interested in getting the book and staying up to track with what's going on with the book?
Thank you for asking. And because my name is so out there and I do love the way it sounds, if they go to StefanielLaHart.com, that is the hub for all the information about how to get to my book. Also about my business. If you're interested in social media strategy for your business, I have courses. I work with businesses 101. And then of course, everything about the book and how to get to the book Kickstarter is all through that page. And of course, I do spell my name with an F. So it's STEFANIE. And my last name, LaHart, LAHART.com. But it's okay if you misspell my first name with a PH, because I also own that URL. So I learned that years ago to just circumvent any communication. You can find me both ways, but go to StefanielLaHart.com. All the information you could ever need about me is on there. And I invite you to come, connect with me and ask me questions, because I spend a lot of time thinking about why people do what they do.
Mm-hmm. And one of the beautiful things, you always provide a ton of value. You've given some great courses on previous episodes, on previous Note Camp conferences, stuff like that. And that's why we love having you on as repeat guest on here.
Yeah, when's our next conference? Scott? Don't we have one coming up?
No, we don't have anything coming up the end of the year. We don't have Note Camp until probably June or July of next year. I have not set a final date for that. Therefore,
okay.
Yeah, now we do that once a year for you. So, I mean, I've got my 3-day virtual workshop, but that's just a nuts and bolts training for the most people, for the most part, stuff like that. So we will definitely, we've been excited, with all the different things, social media day, you've been a part of that International Podcast Day and stuff in the past. Yeah, we got a lot of great stuff. So I look forward to, hopefully by the time 2021 arrives here, before too long, we're able to actually put something on the calendar, meet in person, to hang out and have a beer too, right?
Absolutely.
Love it.
If you were in LA, I would meet you right now, because I just got my COVID test and I'm all clear until, I step out of this house and then get exposed to everything.
Exactly, to everything else that's going on. Well, hey, Stefanie, thank you so much for coming on the Note Closure Show. So excited for the book launch. Once again, guys, you can go to Stefanie LaHart. That's Stefanie with an F, and LaHart, HART, with no E in the heart. But this lady has all heart when it comes to helping people achieve amazing success and uncover a lot of interesting things. If you're looking for a little social sleuthing, or trying to track down maybe a borrower, a property owner, some other things out there in our crazy lives of 2020, everybody. But once again, thank you so much for coming on today's episode and sharing. We look forward to seeing your book hit bestseller status and skyrocket up the charts for you. All right, Stefanie?
Thank you so much, Scott. I really appreciate it. And I love talking to you. And I love that you're on the beach. I just noticed.
I try to be. I wish I was in the Caribbean here. This is the basically background from a trip we took a few years back to Nevis and the Four Seasons Beach in St. Kitts, actually. So we shared this. You'll love this. Steph took this picture and shared it to. I shared it to Instagram, and Four Seasons reached out and asked if they could use it for marketing.
Yay! That's awesome.
I have a cool story there.
That's cool.
Good stuff. All right, guys, we will see you all later in the next episode. Go take some action. Go stalk somebody, and we'll see you all at the top, everybody.
Bye.